The floods inquiry moved back to regional Queensland this week, spending 2 days in Bundaberg, where local government came under fire over buildings in flood-prone areas. The Sugar City was cut in two when the Burnish River rose rapidly last summer, flooding hundreds of homes and businesses. Marlena Wapp spoke to the Mayor, Lorraine Pyfinch.
Lorraine Pyfinch, 10 months on from the flooding crisis in Bundaberg. How is the city holding up?
Well, I think we've recovered really well. Obviously, there was an awful lot of work to do in the first few months after the disaster happened, but the community has worked really hard together and have really shone through. And I think, you only have to look around to see how great the place is looking at the moment.
You sat through 2 days of evidence of the hearings here in Bundaberg. There was a lot of criticism about the council's approach to drainage systems, particularly in the Moore Park area, and that a lot of silt and vegetation had been left to build up in the drainage areas, and that then affected floodwaters. What do you have to say about that criticism?
Well, I was quite surprised because most of the people who did appear at the Commission were people that didn't actually have any water in their homes. These were often long-standing drainage issues, and I think the overwhelming thing was that it highlighted just how much we've inherited in the way of poor planning and poor management from councils that possibly didn't have the budgets to actually do that kind of work in the past.
So Moore Park, it's essentially built on swampland, isn't it? Can you tell me a bit about that history of the development there and why perhaps there are a few issues there now?
Well, certainly, from what I understand, the former Wingara Shire Council and then after that the Burnett Shire Council were quite, had to deal with, development applications for areas that probably in retrospect may not have been suitable to be developed because of the fact that they were located on very swampy ground that had been reclaimed or they were in drainage corridors and there wasn't enough preparation made when those blocks were actually developed to make sure that, the proper drainage paths and, curbing and channeling and all that sort of stuff was actually put in at the time of development.
Well, now that the flooding crisis happened in summer and you've had residents at the inquiry saying the council needs to think or give more serious consideration to rapid development in that area. Is that something you will take on board, do you think?
Well, there's been, from what I understand, there were no new homes in our area that were actually inundated. All the areas that flooded back in December and January were in low-lying areas, mainly in the city of Bundaberg, that had a long history of being in a flood-prone area. Modern planning standards, that are in place now certainly would probably have a very different view to applications that might come to their table now. And certainly the fact that we, since amalgamation, have been working together to bring together the 4 planning schemes into one new scheme. A lot of those older planning schemes, especially in the smaller councils, didn't actually have the complexity that, say, the Bundaberg City Council plan had, especially in the area of flood plans and that sort of thing.
Well, an interesting scheme the council's looking at is a buyback scheme. What would be the benefit of buying those houses and then turning it into, I understand, public space?
Well, you just have to look at the cost that the people living in those homes had to face, losing all their belongings, the damage that has happened to their homes. Being where they are, they probably can't get any kind of flooding insurance because they're well known to flood. And I suppose from a long-term community benefit point of view, it would be probably better that those homes were actually removed altogether.
And then the idea would be to make it public space. What would you...
Yeah, well, the properties that we've purchased in the past were either along drainage corridors or they've been in areas where we've actually been able to open them up, just make them public open space. And so, it's a pleasant sort of green area that, unfortunately, during wet weather does become flooded.
As the inquiry moves around the state and it's been in regional cities, we have heard a lot from councils that are doing flood studies, looking at how they can better plan where development goes in the future. But I mean, money is a key issue here. Is that what you're finding here in Bundaberg?
Well, certainly developing a planning scheme is not an inexpensive thing to do. We are investing heavily in making sure that the planning instruments we have in place for the new Bundaberg Regional Council are much improved on what were there in the past. The bigger councils, the city councils, obviously had more resources. They had access to more qualified staff staff within their team, and a lot of their planning schemes were more sophisticated than some of the rural councils, where they just didn't have the resources to go to that kind of detail. So we're working with the community to actually develop our new planning scheme, and that will take time. We were already in that process prior to the floods, and we believe that work will probably take 2 to 3 years.
Lorraine Pyfinch, thank you for speaking to us on 7:30 Queensland.
Okay, thank you.